There's a moment you'll never forget. It's not the shouting, it's not the insult. It's that cold silence, right after someone attacks your name, your character, your intent, and everyone turns to see how you'll respond. And in that split second, your heart races, your throat tightens, your mind screams, say something. Fix it, defend yourself. So you do, you explain, you clarify, you try to sound calm, but inside, you've already lost. Because the moment you defend yourself, you've accepted their story, their tone, their frame, you handed them the pen, and now they're rewriting you. Most people spend their lives stuck in that moment, fighting to prove they're not what others say, trying to fix rumors, correct impressions, explain emotions. But here's the truth no one ever taught you. Defending yourself doesn't make you look strong, it makes you look unsure. And when the room senses that, they don't remember your explanation, they remember your panic. You were never weak. You were just trained wrong, and today, you unlearn that training, because from this moment on, your silence will be sharper than their judgment, and your presence, too powerful to explain. You've been taught the wrong reflex. Since childhood, you've been trained to explain yourself, to prove your innocence, to calm the room. They told you it was noble, they said. Speak up for yourself. Tell your side of the story. But what they never told you was this. Every time you explain, you shrink. You don't lose because you were wrong. You lose because you reacted. They never taught you the difference between justice and power. Justice cares about truth. Power cares about perception. And perception doesn't wait for the facts. It moves the moment you flinch. Alina knew this. A young attorney in London, sharp, focused, already making waves. Then it hit. A quiet scandal. Whispers that she slept her way to a case win. It wasn't true. Everyone who mattered knew it wasn't true. But still, the whispers spread. And you know what she did. Nothing. No tweet. No statement. No office door slam. Just stillness. For 2 weeks, the gossip circled like flies with nowhere to land. Then it died. Just died. Not because she proved them wrong, but because she refused to dignify it with breath. Her silence screamed one thing: you are beneath my notice. You want to know why that worked? Because people don't trust what you explain. They trust what you don't need to. When someone says, "Look at me, I'm not like that," they look desperate. When someone looks back with calm, with detachment, the crowd begins to wonder, what do they know that we don't? That's power. You weren't born unsure, you were trained to be. You were conditioned to think that every accusation deserves a response, that silence equals guilt, that if you don't defend yourself, you'll be misunderstood. But maybe being misunderstood is your greatest shield. Because people can't attack what they can't define, and once you learn to stop chasing clarity, you begin to own presence. That's what today is, not a lesson in silence, a lesson in control, not control over others, but over your own emotional reflex. And when you master that, the world starts to respond to your stillness, not your struggle. You're still here. That tells me something. You've tried to defend yourself before, and it didn't work. Maybe it even made things worse. That pain you felt, it wasn't weakness, it was the cost of trying to win on their terms. But now you know better. Let's show you how to play on your own. When you defend yourself, you don't just explain. You surrender, you accept the role they've cast for you. You confirm that their question deserves an answer. You grant them control over the story. And here's the brutal truth. In any social conflict, the one who controls the frame controls the outcome. Let's say you walk into a room, and someone says, "I heard you only got that promotion because of favoritism." Your chest tightens. You feel that urge to say, "Oh no, that's not true. I worked hard. I earned this." It sounds reasonable, right? But in that moment, you've already lost. Because you played the game on their field. You stepped into their courtroom, and now you're the one on trial. Cole made that mistake once. He was a rising TV host in Los Angeles, good-looking, smart, sharp. Then an old scandal resurfaced, a photo taken years ago, twisted out of context. He panicked, released a video. 7 minutes of apologies, explanations, timelines, proof. The backlash doubled. because when you defend, you look guilty. Even if you're not, especially if you try too hard. Why? Because in the mind of the public, silence holds power. But a long defense reeks of desperation. The one who rushes to explain always looks like they've got something to hide. Now flip the frame. Imagine Cole had said nothing, or maybe one sentence. "That's not how I remember it," then moved on. Suddenly, the pressure shifts. Now the accusers look emotional. Now they look obsessed. Now they're the ones trying to convince the room. And the room, they watch not the facts, not the details. They watch who's calm and who's cracking. That's why defense equals submission. It tells the world you care about their judgment more than your own. It says, you decide what I am, and I'll respond accordingly. But power, real power, says nothing. It lets the accusation hang in the air like smoke and vanish because you didn't give it oxygen. You want to be respected. Stop trying to be understood. Clarity is for comfort. Presence is for command. You don't owe anyone an answer. Just because they threw a question in your face, you decide which court you step into. And sometimes the strongest move is to never walk in at all. You've been told that silence means weakness, that if you don't fight back, you've already lost. But the ones who taught you that never understood strategy. They understood emotion, not control. Let me show you something colder. Something sharper. Ava knew it. She was a rising voice in digital media. Smart, clean, no scandals. Until one day, the attacks came. A fake quote, a distorted clip, an entire hate thread built to tear her down. She didn't post a reply, didn't issue a clarification, didn't even like a tweet. She stayed completely still. And for days, the noise kept rising. Screenshots, DM, memes. The crowd wanted her to flinch. But she didn't, and slowly, the crowd shifted. Not because she defended herself, but because others started doing it for her, comment by comment. People who respected her stepped in. They said, she's never been like that. You're reaching. Oh, this is getting weird. Ava said nothing, but her silence spoke louder than anything she could have typed. It said, I don't need to validate myself. You're doing that for me, and that's the real game. Most people defend themselves because they think the world is fair. They think the loudest truth wins, but the truth isn't what changes perception. The frame does. When you react, you look guilty. When you explain, you sound nervous, but when you stay calm, you create doubt in their narrative. Not by disproving it, but by refusing to join it. And in that vacuum, people start filling in the blanks. Some stay silent, some start defending you. But all of them start seeing you differently. That's not luck, that's leverage. When the storm comes, don't shout. Don't fight the rain, build a shelter so quiet. People wonder how you're still dry. The lesson, silence isn't about withdrawal. It's about direction. You don't disappear, you rise above the noise. You want presence, learn to pause. Not to think, but to let the others lose control first. Because when the room waits on your reaction, that's when you know you've already won. There's a shift that happens when you stop reacting and start reframing. You move from being the one under fire to the one holding the match, not by shouting, not by attacking, but by turning their accusation into their reflection. Julian understood this. He wasn't just a former NBA player. He was a presence, tall, quiet, commanding. One night during a live panel, a commentator threw a jab. You always acted like you were better than the rest of the team. The audience leaned in. The air tightened. Julian didn't argue, didn't explain. He just looked over and said, that's your perception. Then leaned back in silence, and something broke, not in him, but in the man who spoke. Suddenly the insult looked personal, emotional, like a grudge wrapped in a question, and Julian, he stayed still. Unbothered, unmoved, because he didn't let the words define him. He let them expose the speaker. This is what most people miss. You don't need to fight a false frame. You flip it. You let it collapse under its own weight. Not by defending, but by reflecting. Someone says, you're cold. You say, that's how you see it. If someone accuses you of being distant, you reply, I feel connected in my own way, and no apologies, no justification, just clarity without compliance. You don't need them to understand you, you need them to doubt the attack, and doubt starts when you don't flinch. Because the ones who rush to prove they care usually do, but the ones who stay grounded, they're the ones you start to fear. Not because they're cruel, but because they're centered, and in a world addicted to reaction, calm looks like control. Stillness looks like strength. In a relationship, you get accused of not caring, you don't panic. You don't beg, you say, "That's not how I feel." Then you pause, let them sit in their own emotion, and suddenly they're not looking at you. They're looking at themselves. The game isn't to change their mind, it's to hold your ground until their narrative cracks under silence. Because when you stop playing defense, you force the other side to justify their own attack. And that's when the power flips, not with noise, but with presence. Silence isn't peace, it's a weapon. But only when you know how to hold it. See, silence terrifies people, not because they don't hear anything, but because they hear themselves. Their words start bouncing off the walls, no echo, no reaction, just the weight of their own voice, growing heavier by the second. That's psychological warfare, and it works without a single word. Let me take you into a real campaign, California. Local elections, 2 candidates, one rising fast, the other clinging to legacy. The old guard strikes first. Leaks a headline, a newcomer tied to offshore deals, and not proven, not true, but juicy enough to trend. What does the new candidate do? Nothing, no denial, no press conference, no emotional tweet storm, just a silent walk to the next rally. The media, they circle like sharks, hungry for a flinch, but none comes. 3 days later, the story dies. Why? Because the silence rewrote the frame. People started to ask, if it were true, wouldn't he have responded? And others answered, maybe it was never worth his attention. Just like that, the power flipped. Because when there's no pushback, there's no resistance, and without resistance, the attack loses traction. Silence makes them uncomfortable, it distorts their rhythm. They expected drama, they got stillness, and now they're left trying to explain themselves. You think you need to reply to every call-out. You don't, you just need to outlast the noise. And that's the secret. Power doesn't always speak. Sometimes it watches, sometimes it waits, because the moment you remain unshaken, the accuser becomes the performer, and the audience starts watching the wrong show. Let them fidget. Let them explain the joke. Let them repeat the insult until it sounds hollow, because the more they speak, the more they reveal. And the more you stay still, the more they wonder what you know that they don't. That's the sting of silence. It doesn't react, it reflects, and in that reflection, most people see their own weakness, use that not to destroy them, but to remind them why some names should never be provoked. Silence is power, but silence with precision. That's dominance. Most people think there are only 2 options, defend or disappear, but there's a third path, sharper, colder, more surgical. You don't defend, you don't run, you redirect. They say you're arrogant. You say, strange how confidence makes people so uncomfortable. And now who's on the back foot? They say, you're manipulative. You reply, only people who can't be influenced say that. Just like that, you flipped it. The attack now looks like insecurity. And you're not explaining, you're exposing. Phoebe was a master of this, ex-PR director, hardwired for conflict. She knew when to speak, and exactly what to say to end the game. One day, her competitor accused her of ethics violations, live, during a panel. The room tensed, all eyes on her, waiting for a rebuttal. She smiled, looked past the man, and said, interesting take. Then nothing. The crowd didn't hear a defense, they heard dismissal, and the message was clear, you're not even in my league. The man fumbled, tried to explain his comment, tried to soften the edge. Too late, he looked emotional. She looked untouchable. That's the redirection. You don't just stay silent, you say just enough to flip the spotlight. Make them explain, make them justify, make them bleed energy, because once you reframe the accusation as a reflection of their state of mind, they start defending themselves against nothing, and everyone sees it. That's not defense, that's dominance without escalation. You don't fight the fire, you let it burn out in their own hands. Here's the pattern to remember. Accusation, right arrow, pause, right arrow, redirection. Not apology, not explanation. Just precision. It's the verbal version of leaning back while someone throws punches in slow motion. You don't even break your breath, you just watch. And when the moment comes, you cut once, clean, final, then silence. That's the game, because real power doesn't fight noise, it makes noise exhaust itself. You've seen it. Someone gets attacked online, called fake, toxic, manipulative. They write a paragraph, then a thread, then a video, trying to clear their name, but by the end of it, they look worse, not because they were wrong, but because they begged to be seen as right. Online, attention is currency, but silence. Silence is an asset that multiplies, not because you disappear, but because you become untouchable. Marcus understood this. A rising entrepreneur, clean record. Then a rival accused him of stealing a product idea. Screenshots were posted. The accusation went viral. He didn't flinch. No press statement. No "let me explain." Instead, he posted one line. People always call you dangerous when they can't control you. The likes exploded. The comments flipped. The story shifted. Why? Because he didn't defend. He reframed. He made the attack look like fear in disguise, and that's what most people never learn. You don't need to kill the rumor, you need to poison its foundation. Online, the crowd isn't looking for truth. They're watching power, and power speaks in how little you need to say. The 3 tools. Silence, deflection, precision cuts. You don't post emotional monologues, you post one sentence, just sharp enough to shift the tone. They say, "You're full of yourself." You reply, "Confidence upsets the insecure." They say, "You're fake." You say, "I don't owe you authenticity." They say, "You think you're better than everyone." You say, "No, I just think differently." That's not defense, that's frame control, and frame control is how reputations are built or broken. Remember, the digital crowd doesn't care who's right, they care who looks shaken. Stay calm, you win. Look rattled, you lose. Even if you're telling the truth, so don't play their game, write your own rules, and when the noise gets loud, you don't argue. You elevate. There's something strange that happens when you stop defending yourself. Your enemies don't quiet down. They get louder, they get messier, more dramatic, more desperate, because they expected a battle, and instead, they're swinging at air. That's not coincidence. That's the system breaking down. They thought they had control. They thought they could provoke you, and now, every time you don't respond, they unravel a little more. You're not resisting, you're reflecting, and in that reflection, they see their own insecurity. Elias learned this the hard way. He was a consultant, surgical, private, no scandals. Then came the smear campaign, an ex-client trying to make noise, claims of fraud, bitter accusations. People waited for Elias to clap back. He didn't. Instead, he posted about leadership, clarity, and discipline, never mentioning the name, never feeding the fire. 2 weeks in, the accuser started spiraling, screenshots, voice notes, rants that made no sense. By the end of the month, everyone had turned away, not because Elias proved his innocence, but because the other man proved his instability. And that's the end game. You don't win by destroying people, you let their obsession destroy them. It sounds cruel, but it's not. It's controlled, it's clean, it's how you survive in a world that rewards chaos with attention. You're not a fighter in a ring, you're the wall they throw punches at until their hands bleed, and every time you remain silent, calm, focused. You shift the temperature, because most people think power is about force, but true power is stillness that cannot be shaken. Let them talk, let them spiral, let them show the world who they really are. You just keep moving, eyes forward. Posture high, aura intact, because when you stop explaining, you start commanding, and nothing commands more than the one who lets others collapse under their own noise. You don't need a perfect reputation, you need a powerful one. There's a difference. A perfect reputation makes people expect you to be clean, soft, agreeable, predictable, but a powerful reputation, it makes people pause before they speak, because they don't know how you'll respond, or if you even will. That's the shift. You're no longer explaining yourself to stay likable, you're shaping your image to stay untouchable. And that's when the aura begins, the moment when your presence alone does the talking, not because it's loud, but because it's measured. Every silence is intentional, every gaze is grounded, every word is chosen, and rarely repeated. You don't argue, you define your tone, your posture, your response, or lack of one. People start to say things like, "I don't know how he does it, she's just different, I wouldn't cross them." And that's the point. You're not playing defense anymore. You're not trying to correct the record. You're not trying to be understood. Because now you understand the deeper truth. The more you defend, the more they assume you need to. But when you speak with restraint, when you let silence do the heavy lifting, when you move like someone who doesn't answer to noise, that's when the world stops questioning and starts following. You become unpredictable, but not erratic, composed, but not passive. People feel something when you enter the room. They lean in, they measure their tone, because even your stillness feels like a decision. That's not ego, that's presence, the kind that can't be faked, the kind that can't be copied, the kind that makes enemies disappear, not by fear, but by futility, because you're no longer fighting to be seen. You're already seen, and the ones still yelling, still posting, still swinging, they look smaller with every move you don't make. You don't play defense, you define the game.